What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. My name is Will. Over there is my co-host Eric, and today we're going to talk about our start, sits, stashes, and quits for this week going into NFL Week 2. But before we get into that, Eric, you got anything for the people?
Yeah, man. I'm excited for this video. Hope we can help you guys out heading into week 2 of the fantasy season. But also, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel yet, we really highly encourage you to do so. We are helping you out each and every week, getting you ready to set your lineups like we do with this video, hitting you with weekly previews, hitting you with weekly recaps, all the stuff that you need to be on top of your fantasy lineups each and every week. So please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon, all that good stuff so that you can keep up to date with us going forward.
Absolutely. And as we get into this video, we're going to be listing off names and positions. We're also going to list off the rankings of the defenses going into week 2. So we're going off based off of their week 1 ranking, and we're also going to give the historical ranking for that defense based on 2022. So based on how they matched up last year, based on how they did last week, and then we're going to talk about the player and how we feel like they shake up against that defense. So to kick it off, we're going to start with our starts, and we're going to go with the quarterback position, and we're going to start off with Eric's boy, our boy on the channel also, Mr. Anthony Richardson against Houston. Now, hear me out, because the defenses he's going up against, they're ranked 6th and 1st against quarterbacks, but I'm sure there's some context behind that. There's some stuff that we didn't go sixth for week 1, first place for the 2022 season. So Eric, what do you think?
So to provide some of that context that you mentioned, the reason that Houston was so quote unquote good against quarterbacks last year and also in week 1 of this season is just because they're terrible at defending the run and they're a bad offense. So teams get up early and don't have to throw the ball very much. And I think that could play a slight factor here with the Colts, but Anthony Richardson is so dangerous on the ground that I expect him to be heavily involved in that aspect, especially considering how bad we saw Deion Jackson play in week 1. 2 fumbles and almost no production. Zach Moss is still questionable with his broken wrist, arm.
It was
What is the
broken
actual injury?
arm. I believe it was broken arm.
Broken arm, so we're not sure if he's going to play yet. And Evan Hull is also on the IR. So there's not much in terms of running backs back there. I do expect to see a heavy dose of Anthony Richardson running the ball. And, I think he can be somewhat productive as a passer as well. We just need to see him get in the end zone, whether that be through the air or on the ground. And I think he'll pay off pretty substantially here in week 2. Sorry.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I believe the only person they brought into that backfield recently, they signed Jake Funk recently. Shout out UMD.
Yeah.
But
Let's
yeah,
go.
I feel like Anthony Richardson, he's got a lot of room out here to be the primary rusher for this offense and just, to actually see a lot of success against Houston as well. Should be a somewhat competitive game. I feel like it's divisional. The Texans are so bad, but we'll see how it shakes out.
CJ Stroud looked decent against Baltimore in week 1. So yeah, there's potential for it not to be a total blowout.
Yeah, so it could be competitive. Taking a look at the other QB we have in this start section, we got Jared Goff against Seattle. This is also interchangeable with Geno Smith against the Lions, at least in my opinion. But taking a look at the matchups for Jared Goff, the Seattle was 16th against quarterbacks last week, 17th against quarterbacks last season. This game last year was a shootout. I kind of expect the same thing this year. Between the two. Pretty sure it shakes out pretty similarly on the Geno Smith side as well in terms of the rankings for defenses. So I'm just really expecting a high-scoring game. I'm expecting both teams to throw the ball a lot and just expecting this to be a high-scoring affair. So we can say Jared Goff / Geno Smith for this one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would lean probably towards Jared Goff slightly. The only reason I say that is because of the offensive tackle injuries that occurred in week 1 for Seattle. And we saw a very stark contrast in offensive performance for Seattle in the first half while they were healthy versus the second half while they weren't. I think they legit put up 3 total yards of offense in the second half after those guys went down. Granted, they did just bring in Jason Peters to replace their left tackle, so hopefully that'll improve things a little bit. But just a little bit concerned for Geno based on their offensive line health.
All I can think of is that clip where Aaron Donald got through and he's just, oh my God, and he just gets rid of it. It's going to be Aiden Hutchinson this week, but it's going to be tough for Geno out there. So hopefully Jason Peters can help out some. With that being said, we're going to move on to the running back position, keep it moving. We got David Montgomery against Seattle with the 27th ranked run defense going into this week, 30th as of last year. Pretty good numbers, honestly, looking at that right there and the volume that David Montgomery gets too. But what do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, it's definitely a juicy matchup. We saw in Week 1 out of Seattle this year as well that the Rams were able to run the ball fairly effectively. Not necessarily Cam Akers, but I think that's more of a Cam Akers issue than a overall running the ball issue. And I think that the Lions are probably going to lean heavily into that aspect if they can. I do think, like you mentioned, it is going to be a high scoring affair, but I think David Montgomery can still be heavily involved, volume wise, and lots of scoring opportunities I think are going to arise in this game. So we could see some touchdown upside there as well.
Absolutely agree. And the other running back we have in this section, someone else who gets a lot of volume, not super efficient with it, but the volume's there. We got James Conner against the New York Giants. Now, this is a weirder one for me because the Giants going into this week, they're 24th ranked in the NFL because obviously they did not do well against the Cowboys. But last year they were ninth against the run. So this is one of those where I guess if New York kind of finds their footing, James Conner might not find as much success. But this is also basing it off of last week, James Conner going up against the Commanders defense, who is a really good run defense, honestly. And he was able to find some success in that game. Now, I'm not going to say he was great, but he was able to find some fantasy viability through that game for sure. And I think that volume and that role is there for him against New York as well. So
Yeah, and hopefully the Giants offensively get it a little bit more together so we can see more passing game work for James Conner. That was kind of a big thing that we were hoping to see from him heading into this year that wasn't used very much in Week 1. So yeah, I'm hoping to see an uptick there.
absolutely. And moving on to the wide receiver position for our starts, we got Mike Williams against Tennessee, who ranks 31st against pass going into this week, 32nd against the pass as of last year. Seems like a smash spot right here. What do you think about this one? Yeah, it's just about as big of a smash as they come.
This one's too easy. Really, any of the Chargers receiving core, I'm more than happy with starting. But Mike Williams, I think, has a chance to have some explosive downfield plays. I think that that's something that we expected of this Chargers offense with the switch to Kellen Moore. You know, we got the more creative, more efficient run game, and then we expected that to come with better play action and more deep throws. I think Vic Fangio and the Dolphins defense did a really good job of scheming against that and stopping those kind of deep plays. But I don't think Tennessee is going to be able to do that because they're absolutely a pass funnel type defense. So great start. Any of the Chargers wide receivers in Week 2.
Absolutely. And the other wide receiver we have listed here is Zay Jones against Kansas City, who was the 22nd ranked defense against wide receivers after Week 1, 25th as of last year. This is one that I like right here, too, because for Kansas City, at least for Zay Jones in terms of matchups he's going to get on the other side of the ball, he should not see a lot of Charvarius Ward. That should be a lot of Calvin Ridley over there. And in terms of L'Jarius Sneed plays a lot on the inside, so I feel like Christian Kirk should see a lot of L'Jarius Sneed. But Zay Jones, with that being said, should have a lot of room out here to find space and be able to gash this Kansas City defense.
Yeah, 100%. And he's probably even more involved than we thought he was going to be coming into the year. He's the clear wide receiver 2, and he's the one on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, not Christian Kirk. So yeah, I think the upside is there, and hopefully this is also a high-scoring affair, and maybe he gets back in the end zone just like he did in Week 1.
Absolutely. And then taking a look at the last position group for our starts, we have the tight ends. Kicking it off is Hunter Henry against Miami, who is the 30th ranked defense against tight ends as of last week, 30th ranked defense against tight ends as of last year. So pretty consistent across the board right there. What do you think about Hunter Henry, Mr. Tight End 1 as of right now?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this matchup. I think he was a guy that both of us had kind of talked about in the pre-draft process as like a super late sleeper tight end. I think I had kind of preferred Tyler Higbee, and that still kind of makes sense. But I think maybe I should have been pounding the table a little bit harder for Hunter Henry. What we saw from him in Week 1, his usage was incredible, and he gets the juiciest of all matchups here in Week 2. I don't think that he's going to be a great start in the weeks following. I looked at his schedule, and he gets a lot of tough matchups for tight ends, but at least for Week 2, he's going to be a smash play.
Absolutely. Me personally, I was kind of hoping Mike Gesicki would be a guy out here, but still not a guy in New England.
Nope.
Definitely Hunter Henry. The next one we got Mr. Sam Laporta against Seattle, who was the 23rd ranked defense against tight ends as of last week, 32nd as of last year. So they were the worst team against tight ends last year. So with Sam Laporta, I think this is an opportunity for him to have sort of that for lack of a better word, sort of a breakout game for him. Honestly, I think he's gonna, like I said, this should be a high-scoring game. We didn't get to see much out of Sam last week, as of in terms of yak, which is something that he is known for. Which I feel like we will get to see that more on display this week against the Seattle defense, and I'm excited for it, honestly.
Yeah, clearly we're targeting this matchup with a lot of different position groups. Hopefully it lives up to the billing and is high scoring. And if that's the case, I think Sam Laporta is going to have a great week. And then we do have one more name on this list. We did two for most of them. But I just wanted to include Luke Musgrave versus Atlanta. Also a fantastic matchup. They were 31st against tight ends in week 1 and 29th all of last year. He was another rookie tight end with a great debut and a really solid usage. So I just expect him to also have a good week in week 2.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And that's going to round out our starts. We're going to get into the sits now. And at the quarterback position, we got Mr. Dakota Rain Prescott versus the New York Jets, who are 10th against quarterbacks as of last week, 11th against quarterbacks as of last season. Jets defense remaining stout against the pass. What do you think about this matchup right here? Because I just think it's going to be a tough one for him out there, to be honest. Sauce Gardner obviously is not a good matchup for any wide receiver out there. He did have a bad week last week, but I think that's just, that's going to end up changing.
Yeah, we saw the struggles that Josh Allen had in week 1 versus this defense. And so one, I think he's going to have trouble passing the ball in general, but also with as good as the Cowboys defense is, and with Zach Wilson now at the helm of the Jets offense, I don't think they're going to have to pass the ball very much. I think they're probably going to lean on the run fairly heavily. So even if he's effective as a passer, I don't think there's going to be enough volume for him to be worth starting in week 2.
So you don't think game script is going to benefit Dak in this situation?
Right.
Okay, yeah. I like that. And then taking a look at the next one we got up here, we got Mr. Russell Wilson against the Commanders, who going into this week are ranked first against quarterbacks. As of last year, ranked 20th. So bit of a swing in terms of, how this team is playing. But it does make sense because Washington has made a lot of upgrades to their secondary. A lot of people are back healthy now, so they are fully healthy in the defense right now. The defense is playing really well. Also, Broncos are just kind of ass. Russell Wilson kind of ass. So
yeah,
I just don't trust him.
Hasn't
against
looked
this.
great.
Yeah, it's if you have Russell Wilson and you're banking on him this week, which I really hope you learned after last year, he's definitely a sit this week. I would even think this is an interesting question in Superflex. If you had 3 quarterbacks, would you start Russell Wilson as one of them?
Can I get somebody kind of in the same range?
So let's say you had like a Russell Wilson and then you picked up, let's say a Kirk Cousins going into this week as well. I don't know how viable that is or how likely that is in terms of draft. Or even like you got a Matt Stafford later in the draft, someone who's going way later.
I'm starting Stafford. He looked fantastic. Well, he is playing San Francisco, but no, I'm still starting Stafford over Russell Wilson. I'd start almost everybody over Russell Wilson. I think you're right. That's a good point.
I think that's what we're getting at right there. Is I don't even know if this guy is great in Superflex right now. So we need to see Russ turn it around before he's on any sits. This is probably the last time he'll be on this list until he does something. So
absolutely,
that's your shout out, Russ. Congrats. Taking a look at the running back position, we got Najee Harris against Cleveland, who currently going into week 2 ranked 9th against running backs. As of last year, ranked 27th. Cleveland's defense last week was absolutely on fire. On fire might not even be the word for it. So what do you think about this one? Because Najee, not very positive, period. But especially against this defense now, what do you think?
No, I mean, they had like a legitimately historic performance in week 1. Had a fantastic game plan against Cincinnati and just a great performance all around from their front 4, from their linebackers, from their secondary. Everybody involved was fantastic. And we saw the exact opposite from the Steelers offense last week. Obviously, they had another tough matchup against San Francisco, but they looked disjointed. They looked, flustered. And Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator, I just don't expect good things from anybody. And I think you're going to see that as we go throughout the rest of the position groups, that this game has a little bit of a theme here. But yeah, I'm not in on Najee Harris this week against Cleveland.
Absolutely agree. And then the other group that I picked, and notice I said group, I picked the Eagles running backs against Minnesota. Not because they're amazing. Well, going into this week, they're 5th against the run, 23rd against the run as of last year. We personally think that they're only 5th against the run right now because they played Rachaad White last week. But, I digress. We got the Eagles running backs who I put on this list because we quite literally don't know who the starting running back is for this team right now. Like, it looks like it's Kenneth Gainwell, and that's what they've told us, but he's also dealing with an injury right now. DeAndre Swift got 1 carry last week for 0 yards. Rashad Penny was a healthy scratch. So I just don't really know what's happening in this backfield, who's going to be who. And until we actually get a shakeout as to what the pecking order is back here and how they're going to utilize these running backs, I'm not touching Philadelphia's backfield right now. It's just too uncertain.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like, obviously, it was encouraging to see the usage out of Kenny Gainwell in week 1, and he was a hot waiver wire commodity. But, this is kind of what you expect when you give high volume to a guy of his size. He's already dealing with that rib injury, like you mentioned. I think because of that, we're going to see Rashad Penny activated. And so, yeah, it's going to be difficult to try to predict what this running back group is going to look like heading into week 2, which, I'm just repeating what you said. So I'm in full agreement here. I'm staying away from that group.
Bet. And then moving on to the wide receiver position, we've got Garrett Wilson against Dallas, who coming into this week is ranked 2nd against receivers and 28th as of last year. So defense definitely turning around in Dallas out there. Garrett Wilson got Zach Wilson throwing the ball. We got you don't believe in the Wilson connection, man?
No, I do not. This is a sad one, man. Garrett Wilson was supposed to have his breakout year. I mean, like, he broke out last year, but he was supposed to have like his put the stamp on it, I'm elite year this year. And obviously we all know what happened with Aaron Rodgers in week 1. Dallas seems like the best defense in the league, and Zach Wilson is going to struggle. So I don't project anybody on that Jets offense to do well.
Yeah, it's going to be tough sledding out there, especially having Zach Wilson in a Nathaniel Hackett offense, which we saw how well Russ did last year. So,
whole shit show.
Yeah, the entirety of one. Moving on to the next wide receiver we got Mr. George Pickens versus Cleveland, who is currently 3rd against wide receivers after week 1, 6th as of last year. George Pickens should be seeing a lot of Denzel Ward this week, seeing as Deontay Johnson is not going to play. Don't fall for the trap, guys. I don't think George Pickens is going to do well this week. He's already kind of frustrated with the team because he doesn't feel like his role is big enough. Okay. I'm not confident against him. I think it's a trap. I think it's just everyone's going to think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 for this team this week, and he's not going to get the volume, and he's not going to really be super successful, I feel like, against Denzel Ward, because most people aren't. So, yeah, that's all I really got for that.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, like, he is going to be the wide receiver 1, but like you mentioned, the matchup individually with his corner and then that defense in general is going to make it really tough. Kenny Pickett struggled last week. I expect him to struggle again this week. And also, we saw him get out-targeted and out-produced by Allen Robinson. And honestly, Calvin Austin, after Deontay Johnson left, was nipping at his heels as well. So, yeah, I just don't see a world where George Pickens has a good game this week.
Unfortunately. Not unfortunately for me. Moving on to the tight end position. Yeah. Moving on to the tight end position, we got Mr. Pat Freiermuth. As we said, there's quite a theme with this game against Cleveland, who is currently 9th against tight ends going into week 2, 6th against tight ends as of 2022. I really don't feel like there's too much explanation. I feel like we're kind of beating a dead horse with this one. I don't think Pittsburgh, until they show us anything and show us they can be a competent offense, none of these guys are super touchable right now. I kind of want to talk about this outside of the list. Jaylen Warren, in terms of starting him this week. How would you feel about that?
I'm not confident in that either.
Yeah.
He looked decent, and there was a good rep split between him and Najee, and I expect them to have to check down a fair amount. So that bodes well more for at least where he excels. But I'm not starting him this week.
Absolutely agree. Do you have anything else you want to say about Pat before we move on to the next one?
Nah, bro. Sit your Steelers.
I bet. Yeah, sit all the Steelers, man. Don't touch the Steelers this week. Hayden Hurst against New Orleans is our next one. New Orleans first against tight ends going into this week. Also first against tight ends last week. So hurts to see because I do like Hayden Hurst. I feel like he's someone who's featured pretty heavily in this offense because they don't really have anyone else. But it's going to be tough sledding out there against that defense because one thing we've seen defense or offenses with only a tight end go up against New Orleans and we're like, oh yeah, it's just a tight end. That's really the only person they got to throw the ball. He's going to get the volume, this and that. But New Orleans has consistently shut them down. So I don't see too much.
Demario Davis.
Yeah.
One-man show out there. He's going to shut it down.
The tight end slayer. Pause.
Yeah. No. Okay. No, I put him on here because he had such a good week in week one. He was so heavily involved. I think he was the tight end two on the week. But yeah, I expect a stark contrast heading into week two.
Yeah, and then someone else that we're just going to round this list out with, Mr. Gerald Everett against Tennessee, who Tennessee is 13th against tight ends going into this week, 28th against tight ends as of last year. So it looks like it would be a good spot to start Gerald Everett in, but it looks like the team is actually using Donald Parham this year, something I thought they were going to do last year. They're really doing this year. So the split between the two has been more of a 50-50 between them, and the person who walked away with the touchdown last week was Donald Parham and not Gerald Everett.
Yeah.
So trying to guess between the two of them as to who's going to be who out there with this tight end landscape being what it is already, it's going to be tough. I'm not going to say he's completely unstartable because, again, it is kind of tough for tight ends out there, and he is getting used in the passing game. So you can't, 100% give that up. But until we see more of a split or a divide between the two of those, I can't feel confident about starting Gerald Everett every week.
Yeah, there's better bets to make. Simple as that. I agree with you here that I'd be nervous to start Gerald Everett.
Yeah. And then that's going to round out our sits. We're going to move on to the stashes, people that we feel like performed well last week or we feel are going to perform well going forward that maybe aren't ready to start yet on your team, but at some point this season we feel like they are going to be a pretty featured part of your team if it pans out well for them. The first person we're going to start out with is Mr. Rashid Shaheed, somebody that Eric was huge on last year that we're seeing really, really come to fruition this year. We saw it come to fruition at the end of last season with, the injuries, people going down, but now we're seeing it with everybody fully healthy. So that's amazing to see. You got anything for Mr. Rashid Shaheed?
Yeah, so he took advantage of a good matchup in week one. They played Tennessee, right? Pretty sure they played Tennessee.
Yeah, freaking run, dude. Freaking run. Seen that clip, Derek Carr?
Telling Rashid on the game winning. I guess he didn't score, but yeah,
Sort of the game
winning drive.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Tennessee's defense is a pass funnel. They're very good against the run, very bad against the pass, and so it makes sense that all three of their receivers had a good day. And so that's kind of why he's more of a stash than an immediate producer, because I don't think that's going to be the case week in and week out. But with a guy like Michael Thomas on the team, he could go down at any time. So Rashid Shaheed could go from the third option to the second option at any point, and that's kind of what I'm banking on here in terms of his upside.
Absolutely. Next guy we got on the list, Sean Tucker. Shouldn't surprise you guys. We don't really like Rachaad White, and as of last week, we still don't like Rachaad White. He's still not good. So Sean Tucker was somebody who we feel like is going to get phased into this offense pretty soon. Rachaad White probably going to get phased out if he keeps up this level of inefficiency and just not really being good. So you got anything else for Mr. Sean Tucker before we move on to the next one right here?
So I know that we have him as a stash, so this is supposed to be positivity, but it's worth kind of providing all of the context. The offensive line in Tampa is terrible, and he didn't really look great in week one either. So it's not like I think that he's going to be a crazy great ad, but for fantasy, especially in deeper leagues, anybody that could eventually be a starting running back for their team is going to be worth keeping an eye on. And so that's kind of his path to relevance here for Sean Tucker.
Absolutely. Next up on the list, we got Mr. Durham Smythe, tight end for the Dolphins. Ran a ton of routes and saw 7 targets, but it was really just a bad matchup for him. And we expected to get better for him going forward. We were wondering what they were going to do with this tight end position. It looks like Smythe is the answer. You feel confident in Smythe rolling forward?
I mean, I'm not excited to start him because I don't think he's going to be a focal point of this offense, as he shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But like I said, or like you mentioned, he ran a ton of routes. He got targeted fairly frequently. And this team is going to throw the ball a ton. They're going to score a ton. And so he's going to, kind of fall into some good fantasy weeks here and there, just based on the matchup. So if this is more for like deep leagues, tight end premium leagues, 2 tight end leagues, that type of stuff where these kind of niche players are going to have more value. But I think in those leagues, he could actually make some noise.
Absolutely. Taking a look at Roschon Johnson for the next one we have up on the stash. Me personally, I'm going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for Eric, but I think he is the best running back on the Bears right now. I don't know if Eric feels the same way because I know Khalil Herbert is still there, and he is still, a talented guy. But in terms of just all-around talent and pass catching, all of that, I feel like Roschon Johnson is the complete package. And at some point, he's going to end up being the guy in this backfield. It's just a matter of time.
I think he's the running back that the Bears are going to need going
Hmm.
forward. I think Khalil Herbert is really talented. He's a very efficient runner, but Roshan Johnson's not too far behind him in that category,
Hmm.
and he's a much better pass catcher. And just based on what we saw out of the Bears in Week 1, they're probably going to be down in a lot of games and throwing the ball to Roshan Johnson. So yeah, I love him as a stash.
Absolutely. And then the last guy we got on the stash list, someone that we weren't expecting to even talk about this year,
Yeah.
Tutu Atwell for the Los Angeles Rams. Something that was interesting. He was way more involved than we thought he would be. Ended the game with 8 targets, I believe, 6 catches. I don't even remember what his stat line was. I am still in awe.
It might have been better than that. I know
Might
that
have been
him and
eight
Puka
catches.
both ended with 119 yards.
I am
They
pulling
were
it up
tied in that category.
right now. Mr. Tutu Atwell went 6 for 119 off 8 targets. So yeah, 6 catches,
Yeah,
eight
so you call
targets,
it.
119 yards. Great usage to see out of Tutu Atwell, someone that we didn't even think would be a factor in this offense. And with the role that he plays for this offense as well, it seems like he's sort of, it's weird because it seems like he's kind of replaced Van Jefferson in a way because he's sort of that sort
Yeah,
of deep threat field stretcher. And Van Jefferson was kind of phased out. Tutu Atwell seems like he's been moved into that role. And when Cooper Cup comes back, that role shouldn't really change for him too much going forward. So it's kind of
right.
encouraging to
Yeah,
see.
that's a good point. It's a role that's unique. Uh, it's different from what you're going to see from Cooper Cup or Puka Nakua. It's something that he can sustain even when those guys are on the field. Um, Tons of surprises from this offense in general. Matt Stafford, far from done, looked like one of the best passers in the NFL in Week 1. Sean McVay, still an incredible offensive play caller, and that's why Tutu Atwell had such a good game, is because he managed to keep him out of press man situations and used him a lot in pre-snap motion to get him open. But if they keep doing that, he's going to continue to have success.
Absolutely. And that's going to round out our stashes for the week. We're going to move into the quits now. Some people that we feel like not really, you should kind of stop trying to put them in your starting lineups. Probably shouldn't even have them on your team at this point, just based on how we see
Yeah.
things are going to go forward. First person is someone we just mentioned, Mr. Van Jefferson, who was out targeted by Puka Nakua, the rookie, and Tutu Atwell, and that was without Cooper Cup on the field. So it's not looking good for Van Jefferson if he can't see the field and can't out target these guys who essentially just got with the team. Tutu Atwell, he's a 3rd year receiver, I believe. 3rd year, possibly second.
Second or yeah, no, it's second or third, somewhere
Yeah,
in there.
one of
Yeah.
those two. But he hadn't been a guy before this season, and now all of a sudden he is, and Van Jefferson is out. Ah, I'm not. I don't think Van Jefferson is really going to be a guy going forward.
Nah, I don't even have much to add. I think you covered all the bases there. I'm willing to drop Van Jefferson, and personally did in my league in my league on waivers this week.
Yeah, he's dead in the water. Do you want to talk about our next guy we got here?
Yeah, so the next guy that I am quitting is Juju Smith-Schuster. This is a guy that I had a little bit of hope for early on in the offseason, just based on what his role looked like with Jacoby Myers leaving and him kind of filling into that spot. Um, but one, the knee concerns that have plagued him for years have popped back up again, and he's kind of dealing with some flare-ups there. And then also, we just saw him be completely phased out of this offense, running behind Kendrick Bourne, Kayshon Boutte, and Demario Douglas, even without Devontae Parker even in the game. So he's really buried right now. I think there's an opportunity for him to do better than he did in Week 1, but I'm not really going to bet on it.
Yeah, it's tough to bet on a guy whose knee has been talked about as explosive. Um,
Yeah, could explode at any time is the quote.
yeah, so it's tough. Juju, I've been low on him for a long time, and it's just continuing to go forward. And then the last
Yeah.
guy we got on here is a bit of a homer take too, but also a great fantasy take. Antonio Gibson. Get him out of your lineups, man. That guy fumbles so much. Brian Robinson
Yeah.
is far and away the guy out there because not only was Brian Robinson, out carrying Antonio Gibson, which we expected, he was also out there on a lot of passing plays as well, got a lot of passing down work. And keep in mind, this team still has a guy like Chris Rodriguez that they drafted still on this roster as well. I can definitely
Yeah.
see Antonio Gibson getting phased out of this offense, especially if he keeps fumbling the way he does because he's just not doing well out there.
It's sad to see, man. Like you said, we're Commanders fans. I had super high hopes for Antonio Gibson after his breakout rookie season, but yeah, it seems like things are just not going to go his way. He can't get out of his own way, like you mentioned with the fumbling issue. B-Rob specifically, you mentioned he was involved in the passing game. I think he set his career high in targets in week 1 and like involvement in like route participation, and he also caught a touchdown pass in week 1. So that was what Antonio Gibson was clinging to, and it seems like that's already out the door.
Yeah, so that's done. I don't see any reason to have Antonio Gibson on your team unless you want to have a handcuff to the Commanders running back.
Gross.
Yeah, but 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 with that being said, that's gonna round out our list. Hopefully, we're gonna be doing these every week for you guys, keeping this updated, keeping things fresh. Hopefully, getting some new names. Hopefully, some of these guys redeem themselves. But if you guys let us know down in the comments below, is there anybody you agree with, anybody you disagree with heavily down here, anybody you feel like should have been on any 4 of these lists that you feel like we missed out on? Let us know in the comments down below. Hit that like button. It's absolutely free, and it's the best way to get our stuff out there in the YouTube algorithm. And hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you know whenever we drop our latest videos. But Eric, you got anything else for the video? Anything else for the people before we get out of here?
Yeah, check some of the links down in the description below. We got a lot of sponsors and other links, including our link to the Discord if you want to join our community over there or have a deeper conversation about anything that you saw in this video. Feel free to join up over there. We would very much appreciate it, and we would love to talk to you. Also, like I mentioned, the other links, we have our sponsor, Dynasty Owner, kind of a unique and cool Dynasty experience over there if you're interested, and you can use our promo code to get 20% off at sign up. You can check out League Winners as well. They're putting out a bunch of great content right now. You can check them out. And in conjunction with them, we are also partnered with Sleeper, and you can use our promo code FFLW to get a 100% deposit match when you make your first deposit on Sleeper. And then finally, we have our sponsorship with Do Numbers. If you're interested in some cool apparel, whether it be hoodies, hats, t-shirts, all that good stuff, they got great merch over there, and you can use our promo code DoNumbers15 to get 15% off at checkout. So go check those out. Support, our partners. Support us. That would be fantastic. But yeah, if you stuck with us all the way till the end, as always, we love you, and we will catch you in the next video. Peace.
Peace.